Welcome to another fun-filled edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With you, as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. The Chiefs have traded Joe Thuney. Did they get it right, making the decision to keep Trey Smith and trade Joe Thuney? We'll talk about that. They get a fourth-round pick in 26. Is that enough? Do the Chiefs make any other changes along the offensive line? Like, who's going to play left guard right now? How does this change the plan at left tackle? Are there free agents maybe that we can get into that they ought to be talking about? We're tackling those issues right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Let's get into it, fellas. Jeff, Sam, a little early edition if you're catching us. Some other, we have other gigs, some other responsibilities requiring us to go a little bit early. So if you missed us on the live stream, we are normally 10 o'clock on a Friday. We are going at 8:30 a.m. for those that are already chiming into the chat room. We appreciate you making the adjustment, making the switch for us. Let's get into it, Jeff. Joe Thuney traded. I mean, this is something we talked about, was a possibility. So I don't think this is completely shocking. Just your reaction when you saw that this was indeed the plan, that they were going to move Joe Thuney to the Bears.
Well, I think it helped make more sense of what was happening with Trey Smith, right? We knew that was a very, I wouldn't say bizarre is too strong of a word, but it didn't make a lot of sense to spend that much money on your offensive line when you're trying to fulfill other needs. And so moving Thuney now at least helps you understand that they were picking between Trey Smith and Joe Thuney, that they saw the opportunity there to get some savings out of this. And I think it was the right move. It doesn't play well for people who want to see this team always be at its best at every position. But Joe Thuney is a 32-year-old guard. He's still very good at what he does, but he doesn't have many quality years left, and he probably wants a new deal. And so you start talking about those kinds of numbers. I just think, once again, you can't be spending a whole bunch of cash on non-premium positions. And so Thuney moving on makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Sam, just your initial reaction when you saw it. This all makes sense. Was there anything beyond that?
No, I echo everything Jeff said, but just to add to it, those three guys in the interior line were set to charge $61 million to the cap next year. And with Creed Humphrey, that number is only going to grow up. This is his cheapest year on his new contract. You already have Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones eating up $101 million against the cap between two players. So if you paid those three interior linemen what they were, going to charge against the cap, those five players, 5 out of 53, were going to eat up 56% of your cap next year. Like, that's why they're moving Joe Thuney. And Jeff said it. I mean, it puts the Trey Smith move into an easier to accept place. I still don't know if I would say easy, but easier to accept place. And this came down to a decision where the Chiefs chose a 25-year-old offensive lineman over a lineman who's 32, who will be 33 next season. You have to get cheaper somewhere. And the Chiefs found a spot where they can get cheaper, where they feel like they're protected elsewhere on the offensive line, in the interior of the offensive line, but also a place where you can get a draft pick in the process. And so, look, their offensive line is not better today than what it was 2 days ago, but I think their long-term plans are in a better spot.
Yeah, I mean, I put it, it's pretty simple to me. I heard a lot of people say, well, would you rather have Joe Thuney and this player? And I'm like, listen, this is what it comes down to. Like, they weren't going to carry both guards. They didn't have the money to carry both guards. So it's a simple formula. Joe Thuney at 33 years old and his cap cost, or Trey Smith, a 26 fourth-round pick, and his cap cost, which at least in this year, when they're tied up against the cap coming off, going for it for a three-peat, they'll have more money. I mean, that's the option that they chose. And I think this deal was done largely when they put the tag on Trey Smith. That's what made it possible to do it. I know the comment of Brett Veach was, well, the cap went up, so that puts Trey Smith in play. I think he got a guy on the hook for Joe Thuney. That's what put Trey Smith in play, right? Did they get enough? Jeff, is a 26 fourth-round pick for Thuney enough in this deal?
Yeah, because whoever was going to take him, they're going to have to pay him, and that's a big pill to swallow for any franchise as good as Joe Thuney is. To have to take on it, to give up a draft pick and pay him big money. But yeah, I think a fourth-round pick shouldn't be minimized. I think if Trey Smith had left in free agency, they would have got a third-round pick for it. So I think that kind of makes a lot of sense in terms of compensation comparisons. And even though it's next year, you still have some ammunition to use if you want to make trades in this draft. Trading back is not something Brett Veach does, but at least one more pick in the quiver gives you some options. And I'm never going to turn my back on a team or on the idea of having more picks to work with. Again, not every pick's going to be a first-round pick or second-round pick. There's a lot of good fourth-round picks out there playing, and you can combine those into better picks if you're really savvy.
Not only, Sam, did Jeff invent a new phrase, a pick in the quiver. I love it.
That's right. Mixed metaphors, huh?
Yeah, I like it. Not only did he do that, I think he nailed it. And I'll say this, I think you and I have discussed this before, Sam. I've never understood the concept of a later pick is worth less, right? That's what pretty much everybody in the NFL will tell you. Like a 25 fourth-round pick is worth more than a 26 fourth-round pick. Look, if you think you can project out what every team's going to go record-wise every single year, okay, maybe you can say that with some reliability. But for the most part, you can't. Unless, like I said, unless there's an obvious, hey, this is their last all-in year, they're going to have to blow this thing up. So next year, that pick's got a chance because they're going to be – I love the fact that the Chiefs took on a 26 fourth. I would much rather have had a 25 first-round pick if I were Brett Veach. I'd rather have a 26 first-round pick. But by taking the pick in the future – we saw them do that with L'Jarius Sneed. Worked out fine, right? Like, I think the Bears pick will probably be lower, but I also think that it had a lower value. That was part of the formula that they're like, hey, listen, you guys are going to be better next year, so don't talk to us about a fifth. We got to get up to a fourth. I just like the fact that they're thinking about adding picks into the future. This is a big picture plan with what we mentioned about the salary cap, but it also shows that they're thinking big. It's not just the 25 draft. There will be a 26 draft and a 27 draft. And just gathering picks any and all the time is a good decision.
Yeah, and I look at the whole view as the whole trade as a long-term, decision here, because I actually said this whenever they tagged Trey Smith, that I thought it was more of a long-term decision than most people thought, because I said Joe Thuney be coming off the books next year. He's coming off the books this year instead. So his money, replaces Joe Thuney. But in regards to the actual pick, I'm gonna say it's less than a coin flip that they actually picked that, use that exact draft pick. And we know that this is the year where they're low on quantity. So I would not be at all surprised if they try and turn that pick into play this year, because I think they're going to look at next year and say, if Nick Bolton leaves, if Justin Reed leaves, there's other possibilities where they get compensatory picks at the end of the third round next year. And I think they look at next year and say, hey, there's going to be a plethora of choices next year. So if they can put that pick into play this draft, it would not surprise me at all if that pick suddenly comes into play and helps them move up this year.
I would agree. I hope not, though, right? Like, I hope it's not. Oh, well, let me put it this way. I hope it's not that fourth-round pick for a fifth-round pick this year, which the Chiefs have done a lot. They've traded, when they didn't have a pick, they've traded a future, or they traded a future sixth.
Was it the Noah Gray? In the Noah Gray one, maybe?
There might have been, but
I
know
fifth for a future one like that at some point.
But I know they traded they were out of picks. I don't think they had a seventh one year, and they traded a future sixth for Bo Pete Keys to get back into the seventh round of the current draft and take Bo Pete Keys. I find it impossible to believe that anybody going in any seventh round is worth any more than anybody going in the next year's seventh round, and probably and definitely not worth the sixth rounder. So I'm with you, Jeff. Do you agree that like this will burn a hole in the pocket of Brett Veach? It'll probably be used as ammunition for this year. It will not be on the board for next year. And do you agree though with the overall concept of getting picks whenever you can get them, as long as it's in the Patrick Mahomes window, it will go to helping the team during what is its heyday?
Yeah, I do think that Sam is right, that it probably is more likely that it will be used as a package for something else. But like I said before, I'm totally in favor, especially a team where the Chiefs are at, of acquiring as many picks as you can, because you saw what that meant in the 22 draft. The more options you have to throw at something, the better your chances of finding players that can help you. The last couple of drafts haven't been as great. Now there's still more time to see how they're going to play out, but it's because you have fewer picks. If you added 2 or 3 more picks that you could be excited about, it might look a little different. And for all the love we give to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick and the Patriots, what they did, they used a lot of picks. And when it was time to get rid of players, they had other guys who were going to step in. The Eagles just did it. I mean, you don't have to go back to the Patriots. The Eagles just did it. Look at what they've done. Trading Carson Wentz, moving on from certain players. They rebuilt an entire defense, had 9 new starters compared to what they had 2 years ago when they played the Chiefs, and they won a championship with that group. That's the formula.
Yeah, for sure. Hit a couple things here. First of all, I love this one. Bury me. It's going to be good. Hit the like button. Thank you. Todd already did. We appreciate that. You can hit that like button. Subscribe, share the link. Tell your friends about the Red, Gold, and Bold. We always appreciate that. Renee says, in Veach we trust. That's a popular one. I think a lot of people figure, hey, let's stay with him. Although there are others that point to the last 2 years of the draft and say, hey, I'm not sure he's got it all, figured out just right. I do think, I don't know where this one came from. Trade Noah Gray for a used towel. Holy cow. Noah John, come on, man. Like, there's a catching strays here.
Good Lord.
We're really even getting into Noah Gray, and then he gets hit up like that. I don't know. I don't get it. But there are people that really question, Sam, what Brett Veach is doing now, because the last 2 drafts haven't been as good as Jeff talking about that 22 draft. There are some people that are questioning. And the last 2 drafts haven't been as good. I don't think there's any way to put lipstick on that. This is a big draft for him, and maybe that pressure will invite him to use that 4th round pick and other picks to make this draft better and say, well, I'll figure out next year.
Yeah, I mean, I really commend Brett Veach for this move, because I think the easier thing would have been to overreact to the Super Bowl in that one game. We talked about that on Tuesday, that you could get yourself in a bad spot if you just look at that game in a vacuum and make all your moves to try and fix that game. And instead, after their offensive line got its butt kicked, in front of a couple 100 million people on TV, he trades away a 4-time All-Pro, because it's the best thing for the long term. Like, the way I phrased it when I wrote about it this week was, he's not preserving the protection of Patrick Mahomes. He's preserving the protection of the Patrick Mahomes championship window. Like, this is how you extend a window, and not just, last year they went more all in than we've ever seen them go all in. Like, they chased a three-peat. They wanted to be the first team in history, because that's a forever thing. And they're paying some repercussions for that. And you can't do that every year. And this is a move that is going to set them up better for a year from now when they get an extra pick, and to better complement the rest of their roster, even if it's not that exact problem that they had in the Super Bowl a year ago. And like I said, I think he deserves a lot of credit for doing what I think is the harder decision to make.
Jeff, could they have handled it better? And I think we're all in agreement that we like what they did. So this isn't like, what the hell are they doing? When I asked this question, was there some way, it's kind of to get at, was this absolutely the best way to handle this interior line situation? Is this absolutely the best way to at least start addressing the line as a whole? We'll talk about left tackle coming up here in a minute. But is there something you think they could have done differently to handle this better?
I don't think so, because you have to keep in mind they're still trying to figure out how to manage the cap, right? I mean, are they even cap compliant yet? As much as we talk about the savings, the guaranteed franchise tag puts Trey Smith into a position where they still don't have a ton of money
They don't have
to. So.
No, they're still going to have to, if they're going to play in the free agent sandbox, they're still going to have to redo Patrick, bring some money up front to Patrick Mahomes, roll back some cost. They're still going to have to clean some things up.
Or sign Trey Smith to an extension. I think, to answer Jeff's question, they're within like a $5 million range of being cap compliant.
Yeah, and I think they'll do the house cleaning that they were already working on doing, and they'll get there. But again, there's work to be done. So it begs the question: could they have done it better?
Yeah, I think they're doing the best they can. I don't think that I don't have any complaint with how they're handling it. I do believe that, as Sam said, I think the cap going up probably did help make it easier to make this move with Trey Smith. But I do agree that being at the combine, probably talking to Ryan Poles, even before that, they probably sensed, okay, we got a taker in Joe Thuney. Let's make this move. But still, the overall thing, the biggest goal in all this is trying to figure out how to stabilize left tackle, right? And so I think they're still trying to figure out how we make this work without diminishing what we already have. Who do we trust that's already in-house, which is another part of the conversation we'll get into. And so I don't think that there was a lot of time to really sit back and say, oh, this is going to be the perfect way to play this. I think it's very fluid. And I think it all comes down to what makes the most sense. The easiest thing to do is what they did with Trey Smith. Second easiest thing to do was getting rid of Joe Thuney. Now it gets really hard.
Yeah, it does get harder. And listen, it's always going to be hard. Let's acknowledge that they are always going to be in a bit of a different situation because of how much they've got going on, right? Like, because, carrying that big cap number is always going to be an issue. I want to hit on a couple things, Sam, real quick from this. Todd said, Jeff mentioned Thuney wants a new contract. That lowers his trade value. I would tend to agree. So does, as we mentioned, 33 years old.
Isn't that like, that's one of my takeaways from the Bears. Part of this is, I mean, you kind of lost leverage with the player you just traded for, that he knows you traded a draft pick for him. Yeah. That doesn't look like nearly as good of a deal if it's only a 1-year deal.
Let me hit a couple other things here. Mr. Proctober. I don't know if he's a proctologist or just a fan of October. They played it right, got Thuney for his absolute best season, got a pick for him. He gets to get paid again, win-win all around. And then Kevin says, only 1 year left on his contract. That hurts the trade value. Still not cheap, right? Meaning his cost to the team, his cost against the cap is not cheap. I think that's great. And then Bob wants to know, should they still be trading? Basically, he says, Trey Smith, should they be moving him for more draft picks and just unloading on all this? To me, if there's a place where they didn't get it right, Sam, it's let's go back to summer. You got Creed Humphrey done. Why didn't you get Trey Smith done? And a little bit of that calls for you to look into your crystal ball and know that Trey Smith is still going to be playing at a high level a year later. But what information did we get in the 2024 season that made you say Trey Smith is better or worse? Like what evolved in this season? I would say if they could have done it better, it would have been getting Trey Smith done last August, right? When they were announcing Creed Humphrey's extension to announce his. Now, what it might have done, but I think that's your point right here, Sam. You could say, well, but then they couldn't have gotten anything for Joe Thuney because they would have known you'd had to have traded Joe Thuney. No, actually, it had even more cap space and could have carried Joe Thuney and perhaps increased his trade value because, as you put it, pretty. I think a lot of people probably looked at the situation and said, they got to move somebody. Somebody's got to go. And I don't know that we're going to help him out. And Davante Adams, the Packers, shopped around. Everybody said, you got to cut him. We're not biting for this. And so to get a 4th-round pick is one reason why I think now, where they sit now, it is about, I think Jeff's right. Now it's as good a job as you could have done. But where they got to get to is when they go into that year with Trey Smith, they got to either trade him and get more draft picks than they would get in compensation or get when they're up against it, or they got to sign him back then. And I just don't understand what happened this year that made you go, oh, yeah, now we want Trey Smith. He was 34th, according to PFF, in pass blocking. He was 16th overall as a guard. What made you say in 24? What different view do you have of Trey Smith now than you had in training camp? And he would have been cheaper in training camp because you're giving him the money a year earlier.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I don't view Trey Smith.
Well, what are you? Come on, Sam.
Well, I mean, I know this. The salary cap coming in at $10 million more than they expected. Even if you're going to trade Joe Thuney, did have an effect on their thoughts on Trey. I don't think the Chiefs went into this offseason before the salary cap increased and thought they were going to get Trey Smith back. I think they thought there was less than a coin flip chance that Trey Smith would be playing for him, and that in that case is a similar mindset that they have last summer.
Is that a mistake? Is saying, hey, the 10 million, let's squeeze even more into right now into saying, okay, look, we've got even more to play in the big picture long haul. Is that a place where maybe they're making a mistake? Should that have been what changed their mind on him?
Well, what else? Are you just asking if it should have changed their mind at all? I mean, I wasn't crazy about tagging Trey Smith.
Well, just to answer that, so you can answer my question, but yes, I think it's a mistake if the reason you're keeping Trey Smith is because they gave you a little more this year. I think that's a mistake. I think that's where I think they could have done better. You should have known you either do or don't want Trey Smith. He either is or isn't part of the equation. And so to me, this is a move that should have been made when they made Creed Humphrey, right? Otherwise, everything that we would say about why you wait on Trey Smith, you should have waited on Creed Humphrey.
Well, I mean, I think they viewed Creed Humphrey as the very best at his position. And that's what we had seen with Chris Jones a year earlier, is that they will pay when they feel like you are at the absolute top of your position. I mean, people forget they tried to pay Tyreek Hill near the top of his position before they traded. I'm like, they didn't go into the offseason saying, hey, we're going to trade Tyreek Hill this year. I mean, they will pay guys at the top of their position. And I mean, this doesn't change the fact that they liked Creed Humphrey at his position more than they liked the value that they were going to get out of Trey Smith. Like that aspect still remains true. I will say, I think the salary cap should affect all of your moves. I mean, this is a salary cap league. And so if the salary cap is, $10 million out of, 270 is a pretty decent chunk. That's like 4% higher than you're anticipating. So like, I do think all this stuff should be affected by where the salary cap number comes in. And if that changes a bit, I've been on the record saying it, like $23 million is a lot to pay any right guard. I think Trey Smith is really good. $23 million is a lot to pay that particular position.
Yeah. And I don't even know if he would have taken a lower deal last year, given the way the guard market exploded. And so you got to factor that into the conversation about him as well. But I agree with what Sam is saying. I think they thought Trey Smith was gone. And I think what blew up this whole thing was a guy named Kingsley Suamataia, because once they realized how much of a problem they had at left tackle with their pad protection, all of a sudden, now they're scrambling to figure that part out. And if you have to start feeling weird about that spot, and now you're thinking, okay, Jawan Taylor's probably not going to be here after next year, like, I think Trey Smith's value went up as Kingsley Suamataia's career started going.
That's actually a really good point. Like, do we think that the Chiefs are making this deal of Kingsley Suamataia had developed into a very serviceable starter at left tackle? Probably not. I mean, they probably have Suamataia and Joe Thuney going into next year.
That's the best reason to not be doing it. But also I would say you'd have a cheap left tackle. You'd have a cost certainty at left tackle. So if you thought he was going to be good, all the more reason to go ahead and lock in the guard because you think you've got the cheap option at left tackle. That is part of what ESPN's guy who was slobbering all over Kingsley Suamataia. I don't know why.
Louis Riddick.
Louis Riddick was talking about. Think about they've got a Pro Bowl caliber, tackle at this price. I mean, it's scary to think what the Chiefs can be. Yeah, it was scary to think what he ended up being. We'll talk more about that in a minute after you hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete about those wonderful chicken fajita tacos that are available at Whataburger. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. At Whataburger, the flavor you've been asking for is back. For a limited time, check out the chicken fajita tacos or grab the Monterey Melt with all those same great flavors you've been missing. Also, for a limited time, check out the all-new Mexican hot chocolate coffee. Or you can try the Mexican hot chocolate shake. That's right, sweet, rich cocoa, warm Mexican cinnamon, notes of brown sugar, and a light kick of chili, swirled in a creamy blend of vanilla ice cream. And don't forget, you can get all your Whataburger favorites and more by downloading the Whataburger app with the QR code. Whataburger, proud sponsor of the Red, Gold, and Bold. All right, Jeff, let's talk about who's going to play left guard right now. right? Joe Thuney's out, so now you got to find somebody. We talked about this as possibilities on the right side. We know who a lot of the names are: Kingsley Suamataia, Wanya Morris, Hunter Norzad, CJ Hansen. Those are all the draft picks from the last couple of years. Mike Caliendo is a restricted free agent. So he's a guy that they can bring back into the mix as well. And then there's a draft and free agency sitting out there. What is the plan now at left guard?
Well, I would think Kingsley Suamataia is going to get first shot at it, right? I think they want to find some way to help his confidence and make him feel good. So giving him first crack would do that. Now, whether he can hold the job is a different question. And you mentioned they got some guys they drafted as well who should be in the picture, but I would hope it'd be a competition, and they'd be open-minded about not so much where you drafted a guy and hope you don't look stupid because he didn't work out. Talking about Kingsley Suamataia as opposed to finding the best possible option. And maybe they draft that guy. And maybe that guy shows up as a cheap free agent, that veteran option. But, it's got to be somebody, because right now, that's the flip side about all of this, is that the left side of the offensive line looks horrible right now. And that can't make Patrick Mahomes feel good.
Yeah. Well, where do you think they go? And I love the point that Jeff makes, Sam, about don't just put in the guy because he's the highest pick. Like Hunter Norzad has been the highest graded of the bunch. If he's the guy, then play him. Don't play the second rounder because he's a second rounder if the fifth rounder is better.
Yeah, I mean, look, the grades over one game I don't think are going to influence us at all. I think it's going to be what this internal thing. They grade these guys every day in practice. They'll grade them in mini camp and training camp. But there has to be a battle. I mean, the lesson they should learn from Kingsley Suamataia last year is, I don't want to say they assumed he was going to be the left tackle, but they really, really wanted him to win that job. Like, he was given a leg up before training camp began, and then subsequent decisions were made afterwards. Those 7 snaps in Jacksonville that we talk about in the preseason, where you say we've seen enough. Like, they really wanted Kingsley Suamataia to be the guy at left tackle, to where they talked themselves into the fact that he was the guy at left tackle. That's the mistake that shouldn't be replicated this training camp, in which case you got to open it up. Like, if Kingsley Suamataia is the guy, and I do think he will be, he's got to earn it in camp. He has to actually win the job over Hunter Norzad, or if you have a veteran, or if you have a draft pick, any of the other options that Jeff mentioned. He's got to just beat everybody else out. It can't be because he's the guy you want to be the left guard next year.
I think that's a great point. And Jeff, I think the other thing is, right tackle is looming as a decision next year. So Kingsley Suamataia is a name that I think will come up for that right tackle spot. At least get him out at guard, let him play well, to your point about building his confidence. If he can play guard, a less pressure situation, and build his confidence, maybe he does become, I've heard some conversation coming out from there that, he looks great at guard. We love him at guard, but we haven't given up on him at tackle. Okay. I mean, that's okay. All right. I guess I'll live with that comment, but they've got decisions to make. Not only, and maybe this does rebuild his confidence if he can play well at guard, and maybe what they saw in him as a tackle reemerges after a year of playing guard at a high level. They played Eric Fisher inside for a little bit before he moved out to tackle.
Yeah, I've never met the guy, so I don't know what's going on in his mind. Watching him play, the only thing about guard I wonder, is he a mean enough guy, like a nasty enough guy? Like, can he run block? Can he do some things? Because he seemed to be, granted, the way Trey Henderson took advantage of him and the way he played in that game, the way his confidence went down, that would be tough on any rookie. But you do want to see, okay, what can he be good at? Like, for example, like I look at Mekhi Becton when he went from the Jets to the Eagles this past year, and he was an injury-plagued tackle who couldn't figure it out. And he found a lot of confidence playing on that line. But he was playing with 2 other guys who were Pro Bowls and an All-Pro. You put him next to some people, take the pressure off of him, it's going to be easier. I don't know if putting Kingsley Suamataia at left guard and the left tackle still stinks, if there's going to be positive results. I don't know if putting him at right tackle, where he can still go against really good pass rushers when he hasn't proved himself on the left side, is going to be a great result. I don't think it's a left-right thing. I think it's a confidence ability thing. And so,
go ahead.
But they got to figure that part out.
There's just this assumption, because Becton did it, to Jeff's point, that like, if you're a failed tackle, you can just play guard. Like, people should go back and look what the Vikings tried to do last year, because the Vikings could not figure out their guard play. And this, like the Vikings, I think were one of the top potential landing spots for Trey Smith because they tried everything at guard last year, including moving tackles, failed tackles to guard, and it didn't work. And by the way,
Texans did it too.
yeah, that's the more common thing. That failed tackles are usually failed guards as well, even though it is an easier position. Like Becton is trends more towards the outlier than the norm here. And so it's a tough ask to figure out, but the Chiefs do have a full off season. And look, he was practicing already late in the year at guard. They have time to figure this out, but that's my point is they have to figure it out. The assumption cannot be made that this is going to work out.
Yeah. I do agree that it's not just to give you but if you can't move into guard, you just suck. Right? Like it's not that it's
or you drafted the wrong player. I mean,
because he sucks. Like, yes,
okay.
you come to the
I thought when
he sucks.
I thought when you said you suck, you meant the Chiefs couldn't.
Yeah.
No. I'm saying like if it is easier. I agree with Jeff that like there are some skills like Joe Thuney. We saw, there are bigger, stouter, lower to the ground guys on the interior, and we don't see Joe Thuney get ragdolled back into the quarterback the way he was out of left tackle. Well, that's because they don't get a run at him. So there are some specific things that you can do, his technique and all that, because they don't get a straight run at him to power into his chest and blow him up. He serves him well in there. So there are nuances to it. I do agree with that. And I do agree with, a lot of the things that have been said. But if you were thought to have been a tackle, like you ought to be able to be a guard. If you're drafted as a second round tackle and you can't play guard, man, did you swing and miss with the draft? Do we agree with that, Jeff? That
yeah. Oh yeah. And that happens.
You expect him to be able to move in and play guard.
Yeah, that happens. Look, do I think if Jalen Carter lines up over Chadiha Chadiha this year, it's going to be a win for the Chiefs? I don't see that happening right now. And maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, I think the bigger thing, and going back to what Sam was saying earlier about this draft and Veach and the way the last few drafts have gone, I think the pressure on Brett Veach is to start finding more superstars. Not just guys who can help you and guys who can fill roles, but guys who can go to Pro Bowls and guys can go to All Pros, because that part of the roster is beginning to cycle out. And they were talking about this guy, Chadiha, like he had that kind of ability. Like you're not going to keep winning championships just by getting guys who are good players, George Karlaftis type guys, or Xavier Worthy type guys. You get guys who are going to like be the best in the league at what they do.
Yeah, for sure. It's I think it'll be Kingsley Suamataia. I think it'll be a little bit of what Sam said because they want it to be. I think they will convince themselves again. Where do we stand on a confidence meter, Sam, that it will work?
Well, I'm going to couch mine by saying that I don't think this is the most important position on your offensive line. I think you can make an argument it's your least important position on the offensive line. Joe Thuney was terrific of it. There's no doubt you're going to take a step back. But my point is, I think you can better cover for your weaknesses here than you can at left tackle or center. And so I think it could work even if he's not, league average production. And I don't think whoever you put here, I think they'll find somebody that's better than what they were playing with in the playoffs at left guard, which was Mike Caliendo. I think they'll get better than what they were, when they beat the Bills, because they covered for the position pretty well. And Mike Caliendo, you go back and watch the tape, he really struggled against the Bills, and they still beat a team that was really good in the AFC Championship game, because there's more ways to cover for this spot than there are left tackle.
Yeah, I would agree.
Which is why you don't pay your interior line $61 million over 1 year.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. And look, Dick Vermeil had the most expensive offensive line. Everyone's like, the best Chiefs had the best offensive line in football with Dick Vermeil. Yeah, it was the most expensive. It crushed the cap. Like, that was one of the things they didn't have the room to go elsewhere. And I think that's one of the things that they're trying to avoid here in what they're doing. With just saying, look, yeah, we know Joe Thuney's a good football player, but we cannot have all this tied up. We have to have some resources to go elsewhere and get this done. What do we think a contract, Jeff, looks like for Trey Smith? Like what ultimately, I am hearing it is not going to get done by the 12th. which, but there's optimism that it'll get done before, that this is not going to walk right up to the deadline. I feel like every negotiation needs a deadline, but I think the first one is trying to get it done before free agency starts. And once that goes by, I don't see any reason for Trey Smith to sign until he walks right up to the final deadline. So I'm not as optimistic as some of the stuff I'm hearing that they think they'll get it done before it drags all the way out. But what when it does get signed, does it ultimately end up looking like?
Oh, you got to be talking about $22-23 million a year on average, right? I forget what Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis got from the Panthers last year, but they broke the bank, broke the market, and I would assume Trey Smith went into this offseason feeling like he was going to do exactly the same thing. And so I think he's got tremendous leverage right now. When you talk about Joe Thuney's gone, left tackle still a question mark, and he knows what the market's been like out there, and he knows that they got to find a way to get this done. And also the fact that his number is holding up their salary cap. And so, yeah, this is Trey Smith can just sit back and say, give me what I want. I ain't taking no discounts. Now, maybe he will try to be cool about it and make it work so they can make other moves. But I certainly don't think this is an easy deal to get done now. I think it's a lot harder because he's holding a lot of chips here that he should be playing.
Yeah, where do you sit on what this is going to look like when it's all said and done, Sam?
I think that they will get something done with him. And, obviously, as you mentioned, Soren, the question is whether or not it's by, the March deadline, next Wednesday, not as opposed to the mid-July deadline to where you're actually allowed to negotiate with franchise players. But I anticipate it's, probably a 4-year deal, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 22-23 million annually. So it's not going to be cheap. And look, this is why, I had questions about tagging Trey Smith, is because it does affect your ability to be effective in free agency. And there are, Jeff mentioned this on the podcast, but last week or Tuesday, but I think it needs to be underscored. There are repercussions for kicking the can down the road with all your other players, and signing Trey Smith to an extension that you want to sign him to anyway. I actually think this is where Trey Smith has the most leverage, of course, but is it worth it to the Chiefs to pay him an extra $1.5 million annually if you can soften the cap hit this year with Trey Smith and backload it to where Juwan Taylor's going to be off the books after this year, for example, and then he replaces that number. Well, Juwan Taylor's on the books now, and so I don't know that it's not the best long-term play for the Chiefs if it's, if they're $1.5 million apart, for example, to say, we'll pay it now because now we can be active as hell in free agency next week.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Let's talk a little bit about who is going to be playing the left tackle. We'll do that after you hear from our friends at Key Cannabis. Unlock a premium dispensary experience at Key Cannabis. Visit one of their 14 key locations across Missouri for a huge selection of cannabis products and expert recommendations from Missouri's friendliest bud tenders. At Key Cannabis, you'll find award-winning cannabis, convenient online ordering with drive-through pickup and a loyalty program, plus so much more. Visit their Kansas City area locations in KC North, South Kansas City, and Belton. Open 7 days a week. And mention my name, Soren Petro, to your bud tender for 20% off your purchase. Key Cannabis, open for premium cannabis experiences. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, let's talk about where they do go at left tackle. Jeff, what do we think? And, that is the plan, and did it change when it comes to, the moves they've made now to keep Trey Smith and to keep and to trade Joe Thuney?
I still think it's more of a numbers game. I know that there's talk about them being interested in Ronnie Stanley. I don't see them having the money to do that right now from what I'm seeing. The Patriots, I think, are very open about wanting Ronnie Stanley to play for them, and they have tons of money and can get up to about $25 million a year and probably $65-70 million in guaranteed money. The Chiefs can't play in that territory. And so I think I said all along, I felt like DJ Humphries makes a lot of sense. Now, what he wants and what he's interested in doing, we'll find out, but I think he should probably be your first option. And then after that, you're probably going to have to draft a developmental guy. But that to me would make more sense than what's being reported out there.
Sam, if you want to go get Ronnie Stanley, it'd really help to get that Trey Smith deal done and create some extra cap room. Again, we think there's a renegotiation with Patrick, or an extension and moving money around with Patrick Mahomes. That is what the contract was built to do, so they can get there if they want to do it. We don't need the chat room filling up with people like, you can restructure. You're aware, but you pay for it on the back end, and there's a question of how many times you want to do that. But what do you think the plan looks like now at left tackle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Jeff on this. I mean, look, Ronnie Stanley played 17 games this year. It's the first time in his career he played the entirety of a season, and he's going to be 31 in a couple of weeks. He played 13 games the year before. He played 11 the year before, 1 the year before, 6 the year before that. I don't think throwing a bunch of money at an injury-plagued left tackle who's going to be 31 and therefore is not going to suddenly get a lot healthier is going to be the best solution for the Chiefs, because you tie up a lot of money and you're the Kansas City Chiefs to a player that gives you nothing, and it's really hard to overcome that. So Brett Veach told us at the combine that his nightmare scenario is that number 31 arrives at the draft. You've got defensive first round grades on defensive linemen and only a third round grade as a tackle, but tackle's a need. And so therefore you're conflicted about what to do. Well, the way you guard against a nightmare scenario like that is you address it now, so that's not even a possibility in the draft. And I think they address it the way that Jeff said it. I think it is like getting a veteran like DJ Humphries, and we're getting him in the building in March or April rather than get him in the building in November, and therefore probably having a better return on that investment. And then, Soren, you mentioned a couple names on the combine that could potentially be middle round picks at left tackle, that if you've got a better plan in place, a better plan B, then you can take some lottery tickets on guys that could potentially, if they turn out to be plan A, great, but your plan B's at a better floor than maybe what you had.
Yeah, I think if you feel like DJ Humphries there, then let's take a swing for the fences. We've got a uber athletic guy who's not very good, but boy, look at all those tools. Okay, take a shot to adding him to the mix. I think they will. Do we all agree they're going to take a tackle somewhere in this draft?
I don't think it's a guarantee. And look, the one thing that
would you say it's likely? I don't think it's a guarantee either, because you never know how things will fall.
Yeah, I don't even know that I would. I guess I think it's more of a coin flip of whether or not they take a left tackle. And there is something that the Chiefs failed with Kingsley Sumatia, but they spent a third round on Wanya Morris. They spent a third rounder on Lucas Niang. They spent a fifth rounder on Darian Kennard because they thought, hey, this is the all SEC lineman. What a great value in the fifth round. And a lot of people thought they got great value. My point is they've taken a lot of swings at this position. It's not just Kingsley Sumatia that's failed, to develop into a starter at this spot.
Yeah, I know. I listen, they've taken more swings than they should. You should have a higher hit rate at that interior offensive line position, but also part of it, those guys didn't get on the field. I mean, there's a little bit, I think, Kennard, anybody, they thought he was a tackle. I think everybody else thought he was a guard, right? Yeah. So I'm not sure where that was. And like I said, you can draft a guy. I mentioned, you can draft a guy to play tackle, groom him at guard. The Ravens did that with Eric Fisher not Eric Fisher, Jonathan Ogden, and played him at guard for 1 year and then moved him out at tackle. And it ended up working out well. So, I mean, it is something you can do if you want to solve that left. If you bring in DJ Humphries and he plays left tackle and you draft a guy, he can play at guard and then move out. I know Tommy didn't want any part of Jawan Taylor being moved over to the left side. And I think for the most part, I don't think you want to make a guy uncomfortable in that situation. But we know this. Is the starter in 2026 on this roster?
No. No, I don't see that. I don't see
20
that. And really, and I don't see it because it's part. I say this all the time. Part of the issue is you got to stop drafting guys like you're drafting basketball players to be LeBron James. Like have a plan in place to allow these guys to develop and grow and get comfortable. I mean, what they're asking Kingsley Suamataia to do, which is what they were asking Joe Thuney to do, it was starkly different.
Or adjust your offensive game plan and acknowledge that you can't find a guy.
That's what Jeff's saying. That's what Jeff's saying. Is Joe Thuney and Kingsley Suamataia did not have the same assignment.
Yeah, well, but they need to quit having the bigger overall picture be that this is what we want to get to, right? Like I think that's what you're getting at, Jeff.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like, so just acknowledge we're going to take a Trent Brown and we're going to have to help him.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was overstated how good Joe Thuney was at left tackle. He was terrific at guard, still was an all-pro guard. It was overstated how good he was at left tackle because they totally revamped their passing game. They threw their 4 shortest, quickest release games of the season in terms of passing were the games that Joe Thuney played. 4 of the 5 games that he played. Like that, they changed their offense to account for him. And to Jeff's point, sometimes it might not be a bad idea to do that for a rookie left tackle who's never played in the NFL before.
Yeah, but I think they took Kingsley Suamataia because they liked the feet, and they did not. They felt like we're going to coach him up because the tape said he couldn't do it. Right? There's plenty of tape of him getting smoked at BYU. So if that's happening, you should expect, and you're going to put him at left tackle in the NFL and throw him right in there. Like I go back to what you said, Sam. They talked themselves into believing it would work. Like I think they need to talk themselves into a guy that he'll never get beat inside. Right? Like that, we know he won't get beat inside. So if we got a great speed rusher, he's not going to get beat on a bull rush and he's not going to get beat inside. And we're going to have to help him if there's anybody super fast. That's okay to go ahead and take that guy and understand that you're going to have to handcuff yourself a little bit because you don't get to pick in the top 5. You don't get to get that elite guy. I think it's okay to make that decision. Jeff, what do you think about some of the receiver names that are out there? DK Metcalf. Not only are the Seahawks willing to trade him now, but they're also DK Metcalf is willing to let you pay him $30+ million per year. Davante Adams has been released. Should the Chiefs be sniffing around in this corner of the free agent sandbox?
I don't think it's a smart move. If you really believe, even with Rashee Rice being suspended, I don't think you want to undercut what he could be when he comes back from, hopefully he comes back, from that injury. Okay. Xavier Worthy has shown promise. I think ideally what they need is just to find a third option as a receiver. Not a guy who's going to come in and be your stud number 1, because again, they can't afford to pay someone like DK Metcalf. And I mean, the receiver market is interesting because there's a lot of big names. I don't know how much great talent there is out there. And you can get caught in a position where you're overpaying and overcompensating guys who really can't help you be what you want to be. I don't know how I don't think DK Metcalf is an option here. But I also do believe that some other names out there aren't options either, like Cooper Kupp or older guys. There's a lot of older guys out there that don't make sense.
Davante Adams is 32 years old already, right? Yeah. DK Metcalf is just 27. He'll turn 28 in December. So most of the season, he'll be 27. I don't think you can take a shot at a guy who's 32 for the cost that Davante. I think somebody will pay. I think there's a team. He played well enough that somebody's going to give him pretty big money, Sam. So I don't think you can put that kind of contract out there. DK Metcalf, if he's a free agent, okay, I'm looking at him, but anybody who's going to give him $30 million, I don't think you can afford to bring in a 27-year-old that's going to be super expensive and a pain in the ass. And that's the problem. That's what DK Metcalf looks like he'll be.
I even if this was a free agency question, I think it would be an easy question. But the fact you'd also have to give up draft pick compensation, should not even be discussed inside the building. Because, look, I think people should go watch the DK Metcalf film because there's the game against the Vikings where the Seahawks have, a potential game-winning drive. Now they're at their own 10-yard line. It's a long shot. Geno Smith throws an interception because DK Metcalf just totally gives up on a route. And it's a George Pickens-like attitude on that particular route. Now, Pickens is much more consistent with that sort of attitude, but Metcalf gives up on a route because he's not going to be open. Well, guess what? He ends up throwing it because it looks like it's going to be one-on-one. Why not give the guy a shot? It's interception. And there's a reason I think that DK Metcalf was looked that way in the draft by some teams, including potentially the team in Kansas City. And I don't understand what's changed now to potentially, hey, but now he's going to cost $30 million. Well, now what do you think about him? I don't think that makes any sense at all in Kansas
I
City.
think you can eliminate the qualifier. He's got a bad that's exactly why that and red flag about his neck are the reasons why the Chiefs walked away. I mean, I think we would all agree DK Metcalf has been better than McCole Hardman, right? But what the Chiefs, what they and a lot of other teams. He went in the bottom of the second round because
they're not the only team that
exactly
that passed on DK Metcalf.
To Tommy's point, yes, he looks great getting off the bus, and there's a lot of things to like about him. And he started to get to where you consider him, but the attitude was always considered a problem coming out. And I don't think it gets better as his skills decline. Right, Jeff? That's when the real red ass and the problems occur, is when the receiver starts to, create other things that, like, you're just not the player you used to be, but they have a hard time accepting that. And if they've already been a little bit of a troublemaker when they're at the peak of their powers, it doesn't get better coming down the stretch.
No, you don't want those kind of problems. I mean, Tyler Lockett, if he still had something left, I don't know what he has left because he was fading fast last few years, would make more sense. If you're looking for someone, an older player to come and help your team out, because he'd bring the right attitude to it. But yeah, I don't know. I give DeAndre Hopkins a ton of credit for how he handled the way he was being treated down the stretch. Could you imagine DK Metcalf with those kind of numbers in this offense? What it would have looked like? There'd been a fight every day on the side in practice or on the sidelines.
Yeah,
over at Arrowhead 1.
Like, is receiver even a need for this team? It's a want. I think it's a want, but I don't even think it's a need.
They don't have anybody under contract. Like, yes, it's a need from that.
The depth of your roster, yes, right. Like, you've got to fill out a roster, but I mean, you do have Rashee Rice coming back. You do have Xavier Worthy, looked really good at the end of the season. I think you offer Hollywood Brown something that's incentive laced, but like, I see this as a want, not a need, and this team has needs.
Jeff, am I the only one that sees that, Sam is going to continue to try to protect the career of Hollywood Brown? Like,
he always finds a way to slide him into the conversation.
I do slide incentives in there as well, though.
Shot clock was running down there. He just heaved it up there. Just kind of,
Steph Curry
on the rim.
Steph Curry hit one of those last night, so let's hit one.
Every now and then you do hit them. Listen, when it comes to your parking lot, get signed up right now. Seal coating, you need that done. Gann Asphalt and Concrete does it all. The weather's going to be warm. They'll be back to seal coating. Free consultations, no commissions, and in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. We're brought to you by our friends at Key Cannabis. Mention my name, Soren Petro, to your bud tender for a 20% off your purchase. That's right. Get 20% off your purchase just for mentioning my name. And Whataburger, they have their chicken fajita tacos. They are absolutely fantastic. You can grab them, or the Monterey Melt. Also, you can check out the wonderful shakes, the Mexican hot chocolate shake. Right now, get it at your Whataburger. Remember, Whataburger is open 24 hours. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, my name is Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.